Newly graduated from college, a young man from the South embarked on what he thought would be the journey of a lifetime.
But in 1992, Chris McCandless went into the Alaskan wilderness and never came out.
Although many people McCandless met along the way called him crazy or thought he was insane, none of them knew what drove him to escape to Alaska.
Chris McCandless went into the wild to escape his family and build a new life away from his past.
According to John Krakauer, the author of Into the Wild, a book dedicated to describing his expedition to Alaska, Chris's father, Walt McCandless, was controlling and emotionally abusive.
Most people would agree that child abuse is not a good thing, and it can have dramatically negative effects on that child later in life. Children who experience emotional abuse when they were younger have trouble developing and maintaining relationships. Throughout his travels and interactions with people, McCandless showed signs of obvious emotional trauma. Unfortunately, he did suffer the effects of childhood mental abuse.
According to a professional counseling website by the name of Regain, one of the effects that emotional abuse can have on young children is that they can develop the fear of intimacy. Because of a person's traumatic past, they can view emotions, connections, and other forms of intimacy as a bad thing. Evidence of this can be taken from the fact that he didn't have a legitimate relationship with anyone in his family except for his sister, Carrie.
Because Chris and Carrie were never able to establish a strong relationship with their parents, it makes sense that they would become very close with each other. They were experiencing the same trauma caused by the same people.
Very toxic.
It was something Corrine didn't want to talk about back in 1997 when 2020 first interviewed her soon after her brother died. But now, in Corrine's new memoir, The Wild Truth, she says that Chris's journey stemmed from dark family secrets, the traumatic childhood that she says she and Chris shared. The truth, Corrine says, doesn't begin at the bus, but rather at this house some 3,000 miles away in El Segundo, California. Domestic strife brought to life in a movie. Corrine says her dad was often terrifying.
Dad just hauled off and, punched him right on the spine.
Although many people believed McCandless was mentally ill, this is not a possibility. John Krakauer states in Into the Wild that McCandless was not mentally ill. There is a difference between being mentally ill and fearing intimacy in the sense that emotional abuse drove him to isolate himself instead of a mental illness provoking his actions.
For example, Chris didn't value relationships because most of the intimate relationships that he had, whether they were platonic or romantic, were toxic. He only knew loving relationships as toxic because of the way his parents treated him. McCandless also struggled with loving relationships with other people than family.
Though Chris referred to himself as Alexander Supertramp, it was merely another way to separate himself from his past life with his abusive family. John Krakauer wrote in his book It's the Wild that when McCandless decided to rename himself Alexander Supertramp, it wasn't just a name. He was now Alexander Supertramp, master of his own destiny. His new name, however, was not the result of split personality disorder, most commonly known as schizophrenia.
According to the National Institution of Mental Health, schizophrenia in males tends to emerge in late adolescent years to early 20s with symptoms such as hallucinations, delusions, reduced motivation to accomplish goals, difficulty in social relationships, and motor impairment. Of these symptoms, McCandless only showed evidence of having difficulty in social relationships, which is more commonly linked to the effects of emotional abuse.
Rather than any form of mental illness influencing his actions and thought process, he suffered the effects of emotional abuse. Those who suffer abuse in any form tend to feel like they have no freedom, which is one of the main reasons McCandless left. His parents forced him to stay grounded for as long as they could, and once McCandless had the opportunity to free himself from his toxic parents, he did.
As he traveled around the West with his new name and finally able to make choices based on what he wanted, he finally got the sense of freedom that he had been wanting and waiting for his whole life.
Overall, if anyone would have had the same childhood as Chris McCandless, they would have attempted to find ways to escape to, whether it be going to Alaska or just getting out of their hometown.
From his abusive household came his fear of intimacy. Alex Supertramp was a result of his newfound freedom instead of a pre-existing mental illness.
In conclusion, the main reason McCandless went on his great Alaskan adventure was to get away from his family and live a new life that didn't remind him of his past trauma.